Welcome back to Talk Tensors, the show where we like to take apart the most interesting machine learning papers. And today we're going to look at a paper that's really kind of changing things up in the world of computational chemistry.
Right.
It's called Towards Fast Specialized Machine Learning Force Fields, Distilling Foundation Models via Energy Hessians. And I know that's a mouthful, but stick with us.
Yeah.
I think you're going to like this one.
It's an exciting paper.
Yeah, it really is.
This whole area of machine learning force fields, or MLFFs, it's really kind of exploding right now.
Yeah, it's definitely a hot topic.
And this paper really addresses one of the big challenges we've been facing.
Which is?
Well, we've got these incredibly powerful foundation models now.
Right.
These things are trained on massive data sets, huge amounts of data.
Yeah.
And in theory, they can do it all, right? Like they can predict the properties of almost any molecule you throw at them.
So it's like having this master key that can unlock any door?
Yeah, kind of like that. But the problem is they can be slow.
Oh, I see.
Especially when you're working with very specific systems, like a particular protein or a material with a very unique structure.
Right.
And that's where this paper comes in.
Okay, so they're trying to make these foundation models more practical.
Exactly. They're looking for a way to create smaller, more specialized MLFFs that are tailored for specific applications.
Okay, but how do you do that without losing all the knowledge that's baked into those massive foundation models?
Well, that's where the magic of Hessian distillation comes in.
Hessian distillation. Okay.
I know the name might sound a little intimidating.
Well, it's definitely not something you hear every day.
Right.
But stick with me. I'm sure you can break it down for us.
Okay, so let's imagine you have this really big, really smart MLFF. We'll call it the teacher.
Okay, the teacher. I like it.
This teacher model has been trained on a massive, diverse data set of molecules. Now, let's say you're a researcher and you're specifically interested in simulating the behavior of amino acids, the building blocks of proteins. You want a smaller, faster MLFF that's really good at that specific task. We'll call this one the student.
Okay, so we've got the teacher and the student.
Right.
So how does the student learn from the teacher?
So you don't just train the student on a bunch of amino acid data. You also train it to mimic the Hessians of the teacher model.
Okay, hold on, Hessians.
Yeah.
Now, I vaguely remember those from calculus class.
Oh, you and me both.
They were not my favorite.
They weren't my favorite either, but they're actually really important here.
Okay, so in super simple terms, what's a Hessian?
Think of it like this. It's a fingerprint of the energy landscape.
Okay.
It tells you not only where the energy peaks and valleys are, but also how steep they are and how they curve.
So it's not just the shape of the mountain range, but also the terrain.
Exactly. It gives you a much more detailed understanding of how the energy of a system changes as you move its atoms around.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. So the student is inheriting this deep knowledge about the energy landscape from the teacher.
Right.
Even though it's only being trained on a smaller, more specialized data set.
Precisely. And this is what makes Hessian distillation so powerful.
So what kind of results are they seeing with this approach?
Well, the results are pretty impressive. They're seeing speed increases of up to 20x.
20x, wow. That's huge.
Yeah, so you can imagine running these complex molecular simulations in a fraction of the time it used to take.
That could really change the game for fields like drug discovery or material science.
Absolutely. And what's really exciting is that they're not sacrificing accuracy for speed.
Really? So you're saying these specialized models are just as accurate, if not more so, than the original foundation models?
That's what the data suggests. In many cases, the specialized models actually outperform the original foundation model.
Wow. Seems counterintuitive.
It does, but it makes sense when you think about it.
How so?
Well, by focusing the students' learning on a specific area of chemistry, you're allowing it to really hone its skills and develop a deeper understanding of those particular systems.
It's like becoming an expert in a particular niche.
Exactly. You're not trying to be a jack of all trades. You're becoming a master of one.
Okay, so it's faster and potentially even more accurate.
Right.
But there's got to be a catch, right? I mean, training with Hessians, that sounds computationally expensive.
You're not wrong. Calculating Hessians does add some computational overhead to the training process.
I figured as much.
But they've come up with some clever ways to minimize that overhead.
Oh, okay.
And you have to remember, we're talking about a trade-off here. You invest a bit more in training,
yeah,
but you gain huge speed-ups during actual simulations.
So it's kind of like taking the time to sharpen your tools.
Yeah, exactly. And that can be a big win, especially for research where time is often a major bottleneck. So to really see how this works in practice, I think it would be helpful to look at some of the specific examples they highlight in the paper.
Yeah, let's do that.
So they tested their method with 3 different foundation models to start with.
Okay, and which ones did they choose?
They started with MLFF, which is a model that's been trained on a huge data set of biomolecules.
Okay,
Then they looked at MACMP0, which is trained on materials data.
gotcha.
And then they used JMP, which is a more general purpose model.
So they covered a pretty good range of teacher models.
Right, and that's important because it shows that this technique isn't limited to one specific area of chemistry. It's pretty versatile.
So they got the teacher models covered. What about the student models? What kind of chemical systems were they specializing in?
They looked at a bunch of different chemical subgroups, starting with simple monomers, which are like the building blocks of more complex molecules.
Yeah.
They also tested models that were specialized for simulating solvated amino acids.
Which are crucial for understanding biological processes. And then I guess they moved on to more.
Right. They also looked at materials that contain specific elements like iodine or yttrium.
So it sounds like you could potentially create a specialized MLF for just about any system you're interested in.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's amazing.
It is. It really opens up a lot of possibilities.
Can you give us an example of the kind of performance gains they saw, with a specific student model?
Sure. So they created a specialized model for simulating monomers that was not only 4 times faster than the original May-off model, but it also achieved a lower force error, which means that the predictions were actually more accurate.
So faster and more accurate, that's pretty incredible.
It is. And what's even more remarkable is that they accomplished this with a student model that was significantly smaller than the original foundation model.
So it's not just about speed and accuracy. It's also about making these simulations more accessible.
Exactly. You don't need a supercomputer to run these specialized models.
That's huge for researchers who might not have access to those kinds of resources.
Right. It really democratizes the field in a way.
This Hessian distillation technique, it really seems like a big leap forward in the world of MLFFs.
It really does.
But to really appreciate its significance, I think it would be helpful to take a step back and understand how we got here.
Yeah, you're right.
What were some of the key milestones that led to the development of MLFFs in the first place?
That's a good point. To understand where we are, it's always helpful to look back at where we came from.
Absolutely.
So in the early days of MLFFs, the models were pretty basic.
Okay.
They were often trained on relatively small and very specific data sets.
I see.
And they were good at predicting the properties of those particular molecules or materials.
Right.
But they weren't very good at generalizing to anything new.
So they were like specialists, but not very adaptable.
Yeah, pretty much.
Kind of the opposite of the foundation models we've been talking about.
Exactly. And, it was a trade-off.
Right.
You could have accuracy for a narrow range of systems, or you could have broader applicability, but with less precision.
You couldn't have both.
Not really, not back then.
So what changed?
Well, a couple of things.
Okay.
First, computing power started to increase exponentially.
Right.
And second, we started to get access to much larger data sets.
So researchers could start thinking bigger.
Exactly. And that's when they began to explore more general purpose MLFFs.
And that's where graph neural networks come into play, right?
You got it. GNNs were a real game changer for MLFF development.
Because they can handle those complex relationships between atoms and bonds so much better.
Exactly. They provided a powerful new way to model the intricate interactions within molecules, and that allowed us to build models that could handle much more diverse data sets.
It was a big step forward.
It was a huge step forward.
But even with GNNs, training these models on massive data sets was still pretty challenging.
It was still very time-consuming and computationally expensive.
So that's where the idea of foundation models came in.
Yeah, the idea was to train one massive MLFF on a truly enormous data set,
Okay.
covering a huge swath of chemical space.
Like creating a master chef who can cook any dish you can imagine.
Exactly. A master chef of molecules.
I like that. So you train this one giant model
Right.
and then fine-tune it for specific tasks or systems.
Precisely.
That makes a lot of sense. So foundation models became the go-to approach for MLFF development.
They did for a while.
But as we've seen, even those massive models have their limitations.
They do. They can be slow and cumbersome for specific tasks.
And that's why this Hessian distillation technique is so exciting.
It is.
It gives us the best of both worlds.
Yeah, you get the breadth of knowledge from the foundation model,
Right?
but you also get the speed and efficiency of a specialized model.
It's a really elegant solution.
It is. It really is.
And it highlights this trend in MLFF research,
Mm-hmm.
which is this constant search for the right balance between general knowledge and specialized expertise.
Exactly. It's all about finding the most effective ways to use these powerful models to solve real-world problems.
And it's fascinating to see how the field has progressed.
Yeah.
We've gone from these hyper-specialized models to massive foundation models.
Yeah.
And now we're developing techniques like Hessian distillation to bridge that gap.
It's an exciting time to be working in this field.
It really is. It seems like MLFF research is moving at an incredible pace.
It is. It absolutely is.
And it's all driven by this incredible potential that these models have
Mm-hmm.
to change fields like drug discovery, material science,
Yeah,
and even our understanding of fundamental chemical principles.
for sure. It's really pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Before we get too carried away with all the possibilities, I think it's important to circle back to those potential limitations we discussed earlier.
Okay.
You mentioned that Hessian distillation adds some overhead to the training process.
Right.
Can you walk us through why that is?
Sure. So remember, the Hessian is essentially a matrix of second derivatives.
Okay.
It tells us how the energy of a system changes in response to changes in the positions of the atoms. Yeah.
Calculating these second derivatives requires more computational resources than simply calculating the energy and forces.
So it's like asking the teacher model to not only tell the student what the answer is, but also to explain the underlying principles.
Exactly. You're asking the model to go deeper, to provide a more nuanced understanding, and that comes at a cost.
Gotcha. So you're making a calculated investment in training
Right.
to reap the rewards of faster, more efficient simulations later on.
That's the idea.
It's all about choosing the right tool for the job.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes you need the power and versatility of a foundation model,
Mhm.
but for many specific applications, a smaller, more focused model built with Hessian distillation might be the better choice.
It really depends on what you're trying to achieve. Yeah, it all
Right.
depends on your needs and the specific problem you're tackling.
So this paper, it takes a really practical, problem-solving approach to MLFF development,
Right.
but I think it's always fun to kind of step back and
Yeah.
consider the bigger picture, you know?
Like, what are some of the more speculative ideas?
Oh, I like where you're going with this.
Yeah,
What are those blue sky ideas that this research inspires?
exactly. So what's got you thinking?
Well, one idea that I've been kind of playing around with is this idea of combining Hessian distillation with reinforcement learning.
Reinforcement learning.
Yeah.
Now, that's the technique that's used to train those, like, robots that can do backflips.
Right, exactly.
That play games like
Right,
Go
yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I see the connection to MLFFs.
It might seem like a bit of a stretch at first,
Yeah.
but just hear me out.
Okay, I'm listening.
So imagine using reinforcement learning to actually guide the distillation process itself.
Yeah.
Instead of just passively mimicking the teacher's Hessians,
Yeah.
the student model could actually actively explore different ways of specializing.
So the student is kind of becoming a scientist in its own right.
Exactly. Like a little research assistant
Let's
experimenting, figuring out the best way to learn for a given task.
So we could give the student model a goal, like maximizing accuracy or simulation speed
Yeah,
for a specific type of molecule,
good exact.
and then let it just go to town.
Yeah, basically.
Let it figure out the best way to distill that knowledge from the foundation model.
It could even discover new strategies for representing and simulating molecules,
Wow.
things that we haven't even thought of.
That's amazing. That's what I call novel notions.
Right.
A self-learning MLFF that's constantly pushing the boundaries.
It's a cool idea.
Yeah, it really is.
But, you know, this is all pretty speculative at this point.
Of course, of course.
We're just brainstorming here.
Yeah.
But I think the intersection of reinforcement learning and MLFF development is definitely worth exploring.
I agree. It's a really exciting avenue for future research.
It is.
Okay, I've got one last big picture question for you.
Go for it.
As these MLFFs become more and more powerful, more sophisticated, do you think they could actually help us to gain a deeper understanding of the fundamental laws of chemistry?
That's a big question.
It is.
And a really interesting one.
Yeah.
I think it gets to the heart of what makes this field so compelling.
Okay.
Right now, we're mainly using MLFFs to predict molecular properties
Yeah.
and to simulate their behavior.
Right.
But as these models become more accurate, more efficient,
Yeah.
I think they could start to reveal hidden patterns in relationships,
Interesting.
things that we haven't noticed before.
Like having a new lens to view the molecular world.
Exactly. We might start to see things that were previously invisible to us.
And that could lead to some really groundbreaking discoveries.
It could. It really could.
Who knows, maybe these models will help us to finally crack the code of protein folding.
That would be huge.
Or design entirely new materials with properties that we can only dream of right now.
Yeah, or even shed light on the origins of life itself.
Those are some seriously mind-blowing possibilities.
Yeah.
It's both exciting and humbling to think about the potential of this technology.
Oh, I agree.
Not just to solve practical problems,
Right.
but to also deepen our understanding of the universe at a fundamental level.
That's what makes this field so exciting to me.
Yeah, me too.
It's not just about building better tools.
Right.
It's about expanding our knowledge of the world around us.
And we're just at the beginning of this journey.
We are. The field of MLFF research is moving so fast.
It is.
New breakthroughs are happening all the time.
I can't wait to see what the future holds.
Me neither. Yeah, it's really about pushing the boundaries of scientific discovery.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up another deep dive into the world of cutting-edge machine learning research.
It's been a fascinating discussion.
It has. I've really enjoyed exploring this Hessian distillation technique
Me too.
and the exciting future of MLFFs.
It's a field with so much potential,
It really is.
and it's moving so fast.
It is. Who knows what amazing breakthroughs are just around the corner?
I can't wait to see what the future holds.
I know, me neither.
Well, it's been a pleasure chatting with you today.
Likewise. And to all our listeners out there, be sure to check out the full paper. We'll have the link in the show notes.
Yeah, definitely give it a read.
And as always, keep those neurons firing.
And those models training.
Until next time.